Hello lovely people! If you're new here, hi, I'm Jessica. I make entertaining and informational videos about disability, chronic illness and LGBTQ+ issues, frequently touching on how often those things overlap. Like me, a rainbow with connective tissue issues. Often I find myself talking more about physical disabilities, but really, we need to talk about mental health in the LGBTQ+ community, especially after the year that we've just had. My last video was about conversion therapy, and you can click the card in the top left of the screen to watch. And it made me think about the longer lasting effects on our community, the trauma that can stretch down generations, even if we're not actually related to one another. Content warning, there will be mention of depression, mental illness, bullying, anti-LGBTQ+ activities and consequences. Nothing explicit, mainly stats. There's a lot of stats in this video. Did you know members of the LGBTQ+ community are more likely to experience a range of mental health problems such as depression, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, and alcohol and substance misuse? Don't get it twisted, homophobes. This isn't an innate gay issue. It's something you caused. Oh, whoops, I guess that was a spoiler for the whole video. Should probably encourage you to keep watching until at least the 10-minute mark to, help the algorithm. Well, shucks. I suppose you'll just have to make it up to me by making sure you're subscribed, because 40% of you who regularly watch my videos aren't subscribed. In all fairness, I do that too. I find a new channel, I start watching videos, 5 days later I realise I haven't even subscribed. Don't be me. Don't do that. Subscribe. And I would like to take this moment to do a special shout out to the Kellgren-Fozard Club members, or as I like to call them, my clubbies! Thank you so much for all of your love and support on the videos that I make on this channel. My clubbies do an amazing job of helping support me to make videos and in return get an extra, special, private, members only video every month and some other bonus perks that you can find out all about when you click the join button down below. It's right next to subscribe. Now, where were we? So you might think that since there have been such huge strides in recent years towards LGBTQ+ equality, that all the barriers queer people face have just been eroded, and thus we're living in a magical fairyland of unicorn acceptance for all. Okay, you're probably not thinking that. According to the charity Stonewall, half of LGBTQ+ people experienced depression in the last year. And in this video, we're going to look back at the history, talk about why we're still not where we want to be today, and think about how we can move forwards in the future. But again, for the people in the back, being LGBTQ+ does not cause these problems. The reason why those of us with LGBTQ+ identities are more likely to get mental health problems are very complicated, and there are still barriers to accessing adequate physical and mental health care. Side note, I am using LGBTQ+ as an umbrella term, but we're all unique and don't exist as a single group. Also, many people deal with the same issues but don't know for sure that they are on the rainbow spectrum, or where they fit, what their label is, if they even like the idea of having a label. Hey, they might never even want a label, and that is totally fine. But they'll be dealing with the same, similar, or at least highly relatable issues when it comes to being negatively impacted by wider society, whether or not they fit into traditional categories of sexuality and gender. Historical issues. Early attitudes towards homosexuality in the Western world were rooted in Christian ideals, which upheld sex as being intended purely for procreation, and thus homosexual acts were considered sinful, as they could not result in reproduction. I don't know who told them that though, because I got my wife pregnant, so. Religious attitudes carried over into secular law, and by the 16th century, homosexuality had become a felony, punishable by death in England. An equally negative view of homosexuality existed in the medical community as well. Since homosexuality was viewed as a vice, homosexuals were therefore choosing to sin, and medical professionals felt they needed to eradicate the vice by finding and curing the cause of homosexual behaviour. Neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot suggested in the 1860s that homosexuality was entirely inherited rather than acquired from the environment. He based his opinion on his own observations that homosexuality did not respond to hypnotic treatments. Because obviously hypnosis is the only true way to map the genome. As I mentioned in last week's video on conversion therapy, which you can watch by clicking the link in the top left of the screen, there were other researchers who did not agree with Charcot's views. Amongst them was Richard von Krafft-Ebing, a German psychiatrist who was one of the first scientists to study sexual deviance. He believed that all sexual perversions, including homosexuality, were the result of a combination of environmental and inherited factors. This is bizarrely fascinating, but Krafft-Ebing viewed sexual behaviours through the lens of 19th century Darwinian theory. He and many other scientists felt that all non-procreative sexual behaviors should be regarded as forms of psychopathology, since they were not evolutionarily adaptive. I know! If you're not having sex with a mate chosen to best carry your genes into bettering the human race, then why are you even bothering? Clearly you're not sane. Laws criminalising homosexual acts later appeared in the United States as well, continuing to legitimise these views, which are wild. In 1952, when the American Psychological Association published the first Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, it classified certain types of sexual behaviours as mental disorders, and thus became a fairly reliable map of the moral hierarchy of sexual activities at the time. The first edition of the manual classified homosexuality as a sociopathic personality disturbance. In the second edition, published in 1968, it reclassified homosexuality as a sexual deviation, continuing to label these types of sexual behaviours as abnormal. The classification of homosexuality as a mental disorder by the APA had a huge impact on the LGBTQ+ community, as well as on the public's view of homosexuality in general. Since it was supposedly based on scientific findings, it was difficult for people to dispute views which held them as deviant. Anything you say, any argument you want to make, any injustice you wish to rail against, any polite words you want to pass the day with, all can be dismissed immediately because you're unwell. The classification gives scientific, science does not come into this, sweetie, don't pretend. Well, okay, the classification gave supposed scientific weight to the opposition of homosexuality. It wasn't about God anymore. You couldn't just make some atheist arguments to get out of this homophobic drama. Having professionals label homosexuals as abnormal, pathological, and deviant had a huge impact on the community, which was just then beginning its fight for acceptance in mainstream society. Thus, the fight for the reversal of the APA diagnosis became the focus of the gay rights movement. When a thing you cannot change about yourself is labelled in such a way, it is understandably going to have a very negative impact on your mental health. When discrimination against you is legalised, it is also clearly, obviously going to have a negative impact on your mental health. I have a video about Section 28 in the pipeline, but that's a whole thing. Homosexuality was seen as part of the problem, and this was only changed legally within my own lifetime, which blows my mind when I think about it. I was already born when in 1990 the World Health Organization removed homosexuality from their list of mental illnesses. It only became legal for me to marry my wife in 2014, the year we met, and only legal in England anyway. LGBTQ+ people have been here all this time, but we're only just starting to get rights. We don't have all of them. I'm going to really briefly touch on the situation with the transgender community, but it is a lot more complex, so I would suggest that you do some research and watch the following videos. Kat Black has so many wonderful videos on her channel about her experiences, but in Why Trans People Will Never Be Accepted, she talks about tolerance as being, well, come on now, we all know it's not good enough. Also, go and watch ContraPoint's Gender Critical, because it's a really good video and you'll learn a lot and there's history in it. I think for those who aren't trans and maybe just have a vague idea of what TERF means, it does a really good job of filling in the blanks. And of course I have to recommend my lovely Jammy Dodger Jamie's channel. His video, How I Legally Changed My Sex, gives a really good overview of the legal process in the UK and how things work here. Right, so there are two guidelines that doctors use to diagnose mental health conditions. One of those is called the International Classification of Diseases, ICD. The other is called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which we just discussed, DSM. Until recently, the ICD listed all gender identity disorders as mental health disorders, much like homosexuality had once been. But in ICD 11, meaning the 11th one they published, the term gender identity disorders was removed from the mental health category and a new section on gender incongruence was included in the conditions related to sexual health chapter. For the trans community, this is seen as a very positive step. Your gender identity being different to the sex that you were assumed to be at birth is no longer seen as a mental health illness. So that's being trans as a concept, a way of being. Place that in one space. So then we have gender dysphoria, which is listed in the DSM. Gender dysphoria refers to the distress people feel when their sex does not match their gender identity, not the actual just existing. When this causes a lot of distress, it can be defined as a disorder. However, there is controversy over whether gender dysphoria should be classified as a mental health disorder in the DSM. It is worth noting that separate to the issue of whether or not gender dysphoria should be considered a mental health disorder, trans people do on average have a higher rate of mental health health problems, but again, being LGBTQ+ does not make your mental health bad. Being LGBTQ+ and forced to try and fit into a cis-het world does. But everything is all totally fine now, right? Because we're in a perfectly fine modern world in which everything is accepted. I'm so sorry. Modern day. Okay, time for some good stuff, right? It's important to remember that embracing your LGBTQ+ identity has a positive impact on your well-being. Discovering who you are is never a bad thing. Even if you don't initially like what you find, it's the first step on the path to acceptance, and it decreases your inner turmoil, which leads to increased confidence and self-worth. Because you're not fighting yourself internally, you'll probably also have improved relationships with those around you, like your friends and hopefully your family. Once you know who you are, you'll be able to find others who are similar to you and thus gain a community and a sense of belonging. And having gone through all of this turmoil to the freedom of self-expression and self-acceptance means you'll have increased resilience. Basically, LGBTQ+ people are marvelous. Fact. And here's where I may be losing those of you who don't identify under the umbrella. Not because you don't think LGBTQ+ people are marvelous. I mean, you're watching my channel, so you're obviously a delightful human yourself. But you may be thinking, you just told me about a lot of history, Jessica, and I know things were bad in the past, but they're much better now. Well, firstly, calm your boots. That's a pretty Eurocentric of you. It's still illegal to be LGBTQ+ in 70 countries, and you could be given the death penalty in 12 of them. Despite it being 30 years since homosexuality was declassified as a disease, only 65% of those living in UN countries around the world can now be legally in consensual same-sex relationships. And it hits close to home too. A recent mental health study by Stonewall in the UK showed that 67% of trans people had experienced depression in the previous year, and 46% had thought of ending their life. Looking around at the despicable way the tabloid media can behave, and yes, I'm just throwing certain morning entertainment programs in with tabloid as well, it's not super surprising. If someone tells you that they don't believe LGBTQ+ people still have it hard and thus don't deserve to have poor mental health or some such baloney, then here are some facts you can hit them with. Bullying. According to Rethink Mental Illness, more than half of LGBTQ+ identified young people experience homophobic, biphobic or transphobic bullying in Britain's schools, and 50% of those have symptoms of depression. And that's just the people who are willing or able to recognise that as a factor in why they're being bullied. This is obviously heightened in young people who are LGBTQ+, but also Black, Asian or minority ethnic, disabled, chronically ill, neurodiverse or from a socially economically deprived background, and may be getting bullied for multiple reasons. There is never a good reason to bully a person. There is only your own insecurity. Hate crimes. Like bullying, but grounding you clearly isn't going to cut it. A hate crime is a crime committed against a person because of their race, sexuality, religion, gender identity or disability. Unsurprisingly, members of the LGBTQ+ community are at a greater risk of experiencing hate crime compared to heterosexual people. Because heterophobia isn't really a thing. In 2013, 1 in 6 LGBTQ+ adults had experienced a hate crime or incident in the last 3 years. British people, if you've experienced a hate crime, please report it by calling 999 in an emergency or 101 at other times to contact your local police force. Also check the @Stonewall UK account as they have some great advice. Other countries, please do drop your info into the comments. Coming out. You might have had an easy coming out story. You might have had a really difficult time. You might be stuck in the process or scared to start, and you may even find yourself having to come out every single day. Yes, that's my wife. Yes, wife. Like wives, plural. No, not a Mormon thing. It's important to remember that whilst for some people coming out is a relief and it's exciting, for others they may experience homophobia, biphobia, transphobia or bigotry in general and just feel they have to hide their true selves, which causes stress and negatively impacts their mental well-being. This can lead to negative feelings about your own sexuality or gender identity, where you turn others' hateful comments inwards. This can be called internalized homophobia or transphobia. Aging. Talking about getting older on the internet? Goodness, radical. Not really, this platform isn't just for Gen Z, you know. It was still illegal to be gay when my parents were born. Many older members of our community, who aren't even that old, experienced ill treatment because of their sexual orientation or gender identity in the past. This may have impacted them physically, but it certainly hurt them mentally and emotionally. This could have been at work, from authority figures, or their own family. There's also the issue of care. Many older LGBTQ people worry that their sexual orientation will negatively impact people in care roles see them and the help that they are given. Healthcare. According to a recent government survey, around and 1 in 8 LGBTQ+ people have experienced unequal treatment from healthcare staff because they are LGBTQ+. 1 in 7 have avoided treatment for fear of discrimination. Pre-pandemic, of LGBTQ+ people who had accessed healthcare service, 70% of gay and bisexual men experienced inappropriate curiosity by healthcare professionals. 30% of lesbians and 23% of bisexual women experienced inappropriate curiosity from healthcare staff. 27% of trans people were outed by healthcare staff without their consent, and 23% of people surveyed had heard negative or discriminatory remark about LGBTQ+ people by healthcare staff. No. No, okay. Workplace harassment. Since we're on a roll with me just throwing figures at you, 19% of LGB employees have experienced verbal bullying from colleagues, customers, or service users because of their sexual orientation in the last 5 years. 25% of trans people are made to use an inappropriate toilet in the workplace, or none at all during the early stages of transition. Over 10% of trans people experienced being verbally abused, and 6% were physically assaulted at work. You know, the place where we're all meant to be behaving like adults, professional adults. Cultural pressures. LGBTQ+ people who are also non-white or culturally from a country or society that is less embracing of sexuality and gender identity may face additional discrimination. This can come from their families and culture, the LGBTQ+ community, or both. Black, Asian and minority ethnic LGBTQ+ people. By the way, that is the term that we use in Britain, BAME, rather than person of colour. I keep forgetting to mention that in videos and then deeply confusing people. The BAME LGBTQ+ community are 62% more likely to experience depression, but also over half have experienced discrimination from others in their local LGBTQ+ community because of their ethnicity, which just what? How can you expect people to be open and accepting but not model that behaviour? Be the good you want to see in the world, people. In a figure from 2019, half of LGBTQ+ adults were said to have suffered from depression in the last year. I don't have statistics for 2020, but I would put money on them not being better. So if you are feeling this way too, please know that you are not alone. It's hard to believe that some people think we in the LGBTQ+ community no longer face difficulties in our daily lives due to our sexuality or gender identity, but for many, it is the everyday reality. It's important that we open up conversations and talk about it more, that we come together to give support and to fight prejudice. It's also important that mental health charities and providers develop an LGBTQ+ inclusive approach to improving services alongside community members and organisations. You can't just assume people's needs, you have to actually ask them. We need to support every individual in and out of the community. When Linda McFarlane's Diagnosed as Homophobic, a report on the experiences of gay men, lesbians and bisexuals in mental health services was released in 1995, its harrowing tales of their traumas within NHS services rocked the profession. But sadly, when Stonewall's Unhealthy Attitudes report was published a full 20 years later, it was still able to highlight that although much progress had been made, many LGBTQ+ NHS staff and patients still experience discrimination. If you're struggling with your mental health, it's important that you reach out to get help, even if you feel like there is no one to reach out to, even if you feel that you've tried before and didn't get the help you needed. Let someone know if you are struggling. Sometimes even just sharing with a stranger on the internet can help. It's worth noting that studies have shown coming out to just one supportive person, even an acquaintance or a co-worker you don't even know that well, even an acquaintance or a co-worker that you don't even know that well but know can safely keep your secret, may lessen feelings of depression and increase your overall sense of well-being compared to someone who does not come out at all. People often ask me how to help their friends and loved ones who are ill, and I think the same advice applies here. Don't tell them to keep fighting. Don't tell them that it gets better is the only acceptable narrative, but instead just take a moment and really listen. We're all on our own winding paths, and the journey to being comfortable and happy with who you are moves at different paces for all of us. You'll get there, but in the meantime, it is perfectly valid to feel your feelings. It's perfectly okay to not be okay. Just because people in the past had it worse doesn't mean that you can't be in pain now. I'm going to leave links in the description to some LGBTQ+ charities who can help you if you've been affected by anything we talked about today. In the meantime, stay safe, take care, spread kindness, and I'll see you in my next video.